So, welcome to this panel. We started a bit late. I will give you a few more minutes than scheduled because we have very little time. The topic is empowerment of women and solidarity among women in challenging situations and times. And we have, I think Maria said I'm Swedish, and we have a clear overrepresentation of Sweden in this panel because we also have Jim coming from an island outside Stockholm that also has some special bonds with Ukraine. And Jim is a Swedish labor market expert, and since 4 years back he worked for the International Center for Local Democracy, and especially on their human rights-based training program. He has worked with several Ukrainian oblasts or municipalities. For example, let's see if I can pronounce them right. Lviv, Reni, so far it's easy. Kupochunitsi, it's not right. Kupichinitsi, Kamaniec, Podilski, okay? And Nekvorosha. I'm very sorry, Maria is laughing, so it's not that. That is Jim, anyhow. We are waiting for one participant, but I will turn to somebody who is Ukrainian, but is in Malmö, while I am a Malmö person in Ukraine. So we have sort of swapped places, and this is Svitlana Babenko. So she is a Ukrainian gender expert, currently residing in Malmö, working as a researcher in Malmö University. However, she still keeps very close bond and engaged in Ukraine, in civil society and academia, and this she does through the Kyiv Institute of Gender Studies. I will also introduce Rachel while she is not here. So Rachel is also a gender. She has a very wide portfolio. Gender, inclusion, social development advisor to the UK government's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, and her geographic area is Ukraine. She also works with, she's the technical lead for something we have discussed today, disability and inclusion. So here we can actually connect the gender and the disability issues. She works across humanitarian recovery and reconstruction continuum. So she is also specifically working on the problems that is faced here. My thought was actually to first talk to Rachel, but since she doesn't seem to be online, I will instead turn to Jim. So Jim, Sweden is a country that has lived 350 years without any war. What can we say about challenges and challenging situation for women from your Swedish perspective? Or maybe you want to add some of your experience from the Ukrainian oblast that you have been supporting.
Yeah, just shortly, I can say that in every country that I work with, in both Asia and East and South Africa and Ukraine, women are disadvantaged in most areas, especially labor market. And what can I say? It's like in all levels, and we can see the employment rate even in Sweden, who have had democracy and no war for a long time. We have still had gender gap pay in the payment salaries. We have the women still have a lot of unpaid burdens or duties at home. So there's a lot of inequality in all countries. But during the times of war, it's so obvious that the inequality that women face will rise. The economy equality in all of Europe, but also in Ukraine, is less favorable for the women, and it would much likely increase during times of war.
I know that we have a special problem in Sweden related to migrants and immigrant women and the labor market, right?
Yes, yes. We can see that it's been like for at least, I don't know, maybe what I'm aware of is like at least 30 years, but probably it's been there all the time. But I only have figures for the last 30 years. So we have a divided labor market where the vulnerable groups are always having the most difficulties finding jobs. And finding jobs also meaning economy independent. So the vulnerable groups, and within the vulnerable groups, there are always women who have a more challenging situation than the others. So like you bring up, Lena, we have migrant women who are one of the most disadvantaged groups in Sweden. They have very, very a lot of challenges facing in the labor market, entering the labor market, but also to find a job and economy independence.
So the Swedish perspective is that although Sweden is seen to be one of the gender champions in the world, we still have a serious problem with migrant women, especially far from Sweden, that are very marginalized and sometimes say that they felt more empowered and more strong in their home countries. So this is a very complicated issue, even in a country like Sweden, right?
Yeah.
Welcome, Rachel. I have already presented you, but I wanted to talk to you first, but now we swapped the order. So I wanted to ask you, we understand that you have both the portfolio of inclusion of people with disability and gender. And here we have talked about, this is not the question I told you I will tell you because something popped up, right? So the question here is, there is a lot of discussion about the burden that women, especially women, because most of the fighters are men, women will carry when mentally disabled, physically disabled men returns back, are seen as heroes by the community, but are seen like abusers in the family. Now, what in your experience, working in both these areas, can be done already now? What is the best practice? What is the support the international community can give in this area?
Thank you so much, and I really apologize for the technical difficulties.
It was not your fault.
It isn't a meeting without them, is it? I mean, this is a different question, but I think it's a really important one, and I'll be really frank that, you know, this response has been poor when it comes to disability inclusion. It's been poor when it's come to, you know, truly participatory approaches. And when we talk about how do we tackle some of these issues? Well, there is best practice in place. There are ISIC guidelines. We do know so much of what the evidence and the research says, but when it comes to implementation, there are real gaps. And there is a real risk when it comes to social cohesion, when it comes to stability, or when it comes to, you know, GBV, when it comes to all of these sorts of things. But, you know, I also have a hesitance when we talk about specifically war-acquired disability and how, you know, the potential heroism comes with that, because actually the you know, the stigma and discrimination that comes with the disability and comes with the access to, you know, relatively poor social protection and social services for persons with disabilities is really significant. And, you know, we have to be careful that while we talk about men with acquired war injuries, well, there are also men with pre-existing disabilities, there are women and girls with pre-existing disabilities. And when we think about how do we approach this, you know, we can't just take a let's look at how we sort one tiny, you know, identity group. It needs to be taking a much broader approach to inclusion. And what's really critical is participation, meaningful participation of women's rights organizations, of OPDs, and there is such a rich OPD network in Ukraine, you know, over 133, to really ensure that, you know, we are responding to the priorities of women who will have the increased care burden, but as well women and men who are facing both exacerbation of their disability, which may have been pre-existing or may have been war acquired. And without that meaningful participation, which needs direct funding to women's rights organizations and OPDs, for their institutional and influencing capacity, it's not going to be able to deal with any of this. And it's not unsolvable, I think, is my main message, is that there are answers to this, but it needs a much more coordinated approach. It needs a more inclusive approach to both when it comes to system strengthening and reform, but also where it comes to amplification of voice, and ensuring that the appropriate services and supports are in place for both survivors of GBV, but also for those with disabilities.
So yes, so this is something, sorry to interrupt you, but we have so little time. So I will be a little bit rude sometimes to you. So this means that this work should have started yesterday.
Should have started months ago.
Yeah, okay, good. And then, Svitlana, hello Malmö, as they say in Eurovision. Nice to see you. What do you, as a researcher, say about acquiring gender equality? Because earlier here we heard that it was estimated that Ukraine will take, and probably this was before the war, before the full-scale war, needed 130 years to reach gender balance. Is that true? What does the researchers say?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure and honor to take a part here in this marathon. And what I can say is that we, as it was calculated by the group that developed the global sustainable development goals, it's not only Ukraine have to pass more than 100 years to get full gender equality, but the most successful countries have to have about 50 years to get that, if things are going on without any changes in the policies. But what we have that we have active empowerment in changing our policy and our even rule of the games by even under the full-scale invasion, we have, after 10 years, ratified Istanbul Convention, and now we had a lot of sessions that talk about localization of 1325, about need and work of ministries of concrete plan of realization of gender organizations that and NGOs, women NGOs, and legal NGOs that work on implementation issues, on how to do it in work. And this give a hope that we, under these very harsh conditions, we do much more than it was done even before. The other thing which is really very important for me is to proceed with scientific and research-based results in policies, not just to have very small pictures and small problems-oriented things that help a lot of inclusive policy development or decisions under the gender-based violence or army, but to have the general plan and strategy, and to have involvement of academia and academic institutions, both in Ukraine and abroad, and all the academic networks that are developed now between Ukrainian diaspora and temporarily protected scholars of Ukraine, who all of them, and most of them are women, work on how to do good knowledge about development, gender equality, and work with decision making on temporary protected people in European countries for how to study internally displaced people. We work on that from 2014, sorry. This is the other issue, that we have more cooperation between academia, NGOs and decision-making system. I mean, academia, which is about universities, Academy of Science and Research Institutes that are still working in Ukraine. Under the war conditions, we have, as a head of and active participant of Sociological Association of Ukraine, I can say that we have already 18 monitoring waves of Ukrainian society that was done by rating group. And we have data that we can compare only during the war, but we have also monitoring that is done by Institute of Sociology, National Academy of Science, that we have for all 30 years. And we can base our decisions and how on a good verified knowledge.
Okay, I need to stop you because we have so little time. So what you are saying, there is an opportunity here. There is a window of opportunity because a lot of women researchers are now connected to European and maybe even American universities and study these issues. And that there is also a need for politicians or other decision makers to actually feed in research. And then I'm coming back to Jim, because I know that the organization you work for, you are implementing practical program with NGOs and municipality, civil servant and politician in municipalities, but you also have a research department that feeds into that. Do you want to say something about that, how that works together?
Very, very shortly, we have 3 units. We have the municipal partnerships, who, among other things, have one ongoing in Kamenets-Podilsky. And we have the international training program that I work with. And we have a small research unit who finance some research, but also the idea is that all research that we finance or are active in are contributing to the activities and the training programs that we have. So for an example, within my human rights-based approach program for Eastern Europe, we have right now 3 ongoing teams from Ukraine. So they will the training will be supported by our research unit, but they will also meet other Swedish and international researchers, but they will also have strengthened opportunities to connect with other municipalities within Eastern Europe, but especially in Sweden. So we have many Swedish municipalities calling me, how can we cooperate with Ukrainian municipalities? So there is a lot of things going on. The idea with the human rights-based program, it is like one elected politician, it's one civil servant, and one person from the civil society that apply to the program with a real rights-based challenge that should be focused and implemented a solution for that during the training program. So it's right hands-on.
Thank you. So we are trying to tie it up. We have a one round left, but Rachel, if you listen to this, so to get the research to be applied research, empirical research, to actually feed into political decisions, have you any experience from how do you do that? How do you reach the parliamentarians that not always are very academic, to be honest? Depends on, right?
Yeah, you certainly get a spectrum. I mean, I would definitely emphasize that with a protracted crisis really comes an opportunity. and there is an opportunity to challenge harmful social norms, to progress gender equality. And we have seen through our programming how that can work and how we can support more evidence-based, data disaggregated research that is informing decisions. And through some of our programming that we've done, particularly on localizing the women, peace and security agenda, we have worked with partners like PACT, who have worked together with a group of academics and women's rights organizations to feed in comments around the National Recovery Plan. And that worked really successfully. It was, received well by the Gender Ombudsman. It had a direct impact, which we were really delighted about. And we have worked at both this top-down and bottom-up approach, where you have to support technical capacity within institutions, within government of Ukraine, whether that's Ministry of Social Policy, whatever department that is, while also supporting bottom-up in terms of the collective action of women's rights organizations, of gender academics, to help meet together in that middle ground. And when it's done well, it makes huge impacts. And we have seen, multi-year programming that has demonstrated that. But it is a challenge, and it's particularly a challenge with such a fragmented government at the moment, and such, fragmented coordination. But that doesn't mean we're not already seeing success stories. And through our own programming, we certainly have, as well as the programming that others are sharing today.
What is one of those success stories, if you would give us one example?
Absolutely. So the one I mentioned around the National Recovery Plan is certainly one we're particularly delighted about. But we've also seen others, at a particularly local level. Through our PACT project, we did have a success story where, through some of the particular capacity building that was being done, the women's organizations themselves, over, I think it was a 5-month program, while local coordinators and monitoring evaluation specialists and advocacy experts were supporting them in their assistance, there was a really unexpected formation of women's initiative groups that came out of those mobilization activities. And as those women united through participation in joint activities, discussion of common values, it meant that they had a much stronger voice when it came to influencing. It meant they had stronger operational capacity. And with the advisory support that they were provided, they then, I think 2 out of 5 managed to receive funding for their new projects. So certainly that learning by doing and strengthening technical capacity at a very local level can have really significant impacts when it then comes to institutional strengthening, if those bridges are built.
Thank you. Svitlana, you will get the last word. I was thinking 2 things. Maybe you want to say something else, but this is something that I was interested in. So you are now based in Sweden, and I know you have experience from Sweden. Is it easy to transfer, the knowledge we have, the practices we have done? Would it be like sending a man to the moon to send the Swedish gender activists to Ukraine? Because we are talking about this female solidarity and the solidarity with women. Does it work across nation when you want to, achieve these, not only policy changes, but actually changes of the mind?
What I want to say from my experience, that it's very important that we in Ukraine have already passed a big way on developing gender equality and understanding of our place and our empowerment in doing daily life things in many dimensions. We have a great confirmation of this even from today's marathon program. What I need to say is that it's not just taking someone's experience and putting to some other place, because we live in our societies, but what is important is cooperation and inclusion and debate, and nothing about us without us, because we have now our own experience that is also very important for activists and feminists in abroad as well, where in the other societies. And when we talk about this empowerment and experience exchange, it must be exchange, because we live our own conditions. We have unprecedented experience of war and destroyment, and growing up of huge initiatives and volunteering experience. What we do need is infrastructural support. What we do need is cooperational patterns of how municipalities can work in together with government and local society, local communities and academic communities, because we have in Ukraine, frankly speaking, not very high level of involvement of academia in decision making. As I can see, it's different. It's not a different story for the other societies as well. But what I can see in Malmö, for example, that Malmö University cooperates greatly with municipality and have a lot of cooperation and implementation and monitoring of the programs, especially in migration, which is the issue, and in institutions that I'm working in. So absolutely, it is not just to invite people with great experience of development gender equality in Sweden, because we are now not in Sweden in 1950s, 60s, but we are in Ukraine in 2020s under the war. So it is about, first of all, of cooperation and equal partnership. Also, nothing about us without us. Thank you.
Does anybody of you want to give some final words, something you think you want to add? No? Okay. So I think that this, there are a few takeaways here. I'm trying to summarize. So you need to work with academia to practically implement, you know, research that is empirical and that can be needs driven in a way, so that it will be something that the municipalities can use or the government can use. So you need to have a feedback from the academia to the decision maker. You need to strengthen networks between international and local. You need to keep that network that is now strengthening. And we need to also focus on municipalities quite strong, because what I think I heard from Svitlana is that is also a little bit of a weak area. And we need to be very broad in what we do. We can't look at women, we can't look at men, we need to look at people with the needs, people who are excluded or discriminated, and apply that. And we can start already now, because we should have started yesterday. That is my summary. It's probably not accurate, but anybody who is interested can go back and listen to what you said. Thank you so much for taking your time, and sorry that we were a little bit late to get you here, Rachel. Thank you so much.